Welcome to Even Just a Little, where we explore the beautiful gift of choice, tiny trusts toward big freedom, those moment to moment decisions we make that build life. Hello, and welcome to Even Just a Little, where we really dive into the beautiful gift of choice, how the moment by moment choices we make actually build our life. And I am beyond elated to chat today with a precious human I bumped into about not quite a year and a half ago at a storyteller retreat in California, and we were both embarking on a journey of sharing our stories. And this girl has done it. My guest today is warm, witty, wise Essie Perot, and she's written a book recently out called Styles of Joy. And we're going to just rediscover the joy that she did on this journey together. And I just hope that the impact this book had on me, you'll feel the beautiful gift that this is. So Essie is a graduate of Vanderbilt University, Stanford Law School, and currently teaches at her alma mater in Nashville. So thank you for joining us today, Essie, and welcome.
Thank you so much. And this is so special for me to be back on this podcast with you because when we met, I just felt this instant kinship. You are one of the warmest, most wonderful, open, and you have kind of this radiant energy that it was just so wonderful to get quality time with you on that retreat. And you and I have kept in touch since, but this will be our longest conversation since. And I'm so proud to call you a friend, and I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you, SC. Thank you. Well, I felt the same. It was an immediate, and we just chatted a bit before we started. When we first met, we talked about, typical type things, and we did feel a kinship immediately. We sat and chatted for quite a while, but we shared what we'd done in our lives and all the good stuff. But after spending several days together, I think, and Bob Goff, we were at a Bob Goff Storytellers Retreat. He just guides you into what really matters. And I think that's what Styles of Joy also does. I wrote, Styles of Joy opened my eyes to savor gifts that I'd forgotten. And I think that's what you so brilliantly have done in this work. Your wording is so inspirational, and there are little sparks of joy many times on every page. So I think it's important, though, that we start with, how did you get here? How did you land in a place that started you on this journey to writing a book for all of us to discover things we've forgotten? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think I should issue a bit of a warning that, with the day we're recording this, it's Monday, March 10th. So tomorrow the book will be out 2 weeks. So I went on this book tour, and I'm currently sitting in New York on this book tour, and emotions are running high over here. So if I if I am teary-eyed or anything like that, I mean, I'm just letting myself feel it all because this is, when you ask how this started, I think about where I'm sitting today, and that, especially given just the warm reception this book has gotten in the past 2 weeks, is so deeply moving, and I'm just so deeply grateful. And but this story begins, you kind of referenced it, that life is messy, and I was in a big kind of life mess. It was the pandemic, I stopped practicing law and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next professionally. And kind of all at the same time, I got out of the wrong marriage. And what that looked like was a season of very intense grief. I write in the book that anyone who thinks divorce is only about two people is mistaken. I lost a whole family. I lost a whole group of friends. I lost my house and my dog, not to mention my partner, roommate, should have been life mate, my confidant, all of a sudden, and coupling all of that with being in a career pivot, I'm looking around and I don't recognize my life anymore. And I write in the book that you can't move forward unless you know where you want to go. And I really didn't. And the grief was so intense that I was just in this fog. And I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. The fact that we're both Texans is one of the things that we bonded over when we were on our retreat with Bob. And I was living not far from the town lake in Austin, Texas's downtown area. And I started processing the grief by going on really long walks. And I just remember saying to my mom, this is really working. It's fresh air. I'm moving my body. It's time in nature, and I'm getting to reflect and really this is moving through my body. This grief is moving through my body. And that alone would be a surefire recipe, but I added happy music to the mix. And I vividly remember, wiping my tears as I'm about to start this 3-ish mile trail. And I typed good energy in on Spotify because Sherri, I needed some good energy. That was a cry for help. I was like, okay, algorithm, serve me something good. And there was a playlist called Good Energy. And I was like, oh, well, that'll do. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Easy enough. Yeah.
Easy enough.
Yeah.
And I had never listened to Harry Styles before. And his third album, Harry's House, came out 2 days after I told my then husband that I wanted a
Mm.
divorce. So all this new music, this beautiful album, was sprinkled throughout this good energy playlist. And that's when I first started hearing his really happy, beautiful music. And I turned to it to buoy my spirits in a way I had really never relied on music to that degree in the past. And, fast forward, I had this completely ridiculous adventure that unfolded after initially just listening to his music. And I had a Harry Styles themed Eat, Pray, Love adventure where I saw his show 17 times in 5 countries, traveling with strangers I met along the way. And along the way, I started critically thinking about joy for the first time. What
Mm.
is it? Who has it? And the result is a 4-part curriculum or framework of how to maximize joy in all of our lives. And I wrote the book, and last week it hit the USA Today bestseller list, and I am an emotional mess.
Oh, well, I'm sure an emotional, exhausted mess because I can only imagine how you have been working, just teaching and writing and publishing. Oh my goodness. And now this. We're celebrating this. That's what we're doing today. We're celebrating because you have I mean, you've worked so hard. And that is a piece of this. You did take those steps around Town Lake. You did start walking. You didn't stay in that grief, which grief can come in many forms, and you were in deep grieving. So you started walking, and then you attended a Harry Styles and listening to good vibes, and that Harry Styles music eventually landed you in a concert in Austin. And then was Harry Ween also in Austin? I think it might have been. So the first couple of
LA.
concerts, tell me about, you said you landed in a technicolor world of feather boas, sequins, live music, and joy. I mean, if you can land in joy, let's land.
Absolutely. It's worth mentioning that I did not set out and say, "Oh, I'm going to go to a crazy number of concerts." Absolutely not. I didn't see this coming, which is kind of, in the subtitle of the book, which is a feel-good framework for rediscovering joy with a twist. That's kind of the twist, is I did not see this coming. And it just kind of felt like all these fun opportunities kept aligning, and I met the right people who had extra tickets at the right time, and how it snowballed was really so beautiful and something I couldn't have planned. But along the way, I looked around at these concerts because, yes, like you said, I did land in this world of this visual abundance and this beautiful. I write that it was kind of this pink spot in a sea of gray, and
Mm, mm,
and and it was so beautiful to me as I looked around and noted that post-pandemic, all these people singing and dancing together safely just felt like a miracle.
mhm,
And it made me think about all these opportunities to come together in community with one another that bring so much joy to so many people, whether it's religious worship, sports, live music, entertainment, even going to a movie, whatever it is that brings people joy and brings them into joy together. It's
mhm,
just so beautiful and something we shouldn't take for granted. And so it really was this one thing I really think is resonating with readers is even if they didn't experience grief associated with divorce or anything, everyone can remember that time, not, a couple years ago. That in the grand scheme of things is a blink of an eye that,
mhm,
I it's interesting. I did a lot of research on this timeline of the pandemic, and it was April of 22 when the mandate to wear masks on airplanes ended, and
mhm.
the album came out 1 month later. In the grand scheme of things, that's right on top of each other timing wise. And I do think kind of processing everything that we'd all been through in the pandemic. And, I lost a cousin in the pandemic. I lost a dear friend in the pandemic. And, they were on the same day. And so there was so much to process in addition to grief associated with divorce. And I think that I'm hearing that's really resonating with readers as they're and the early feedback. Sherry, like I can't even tell you how surreal it's been to hear from people of what lands with them and what it
Mm.
sticks out is really touching. So
Well, and
it's
that's why we do this. That's why you put yourself out there and put the hours in, hoping that it will benefit another human. So sounds like you're getting that feedback. How wonderful.
it's so surreal. And it's so surreal. I might get emotional as I say this, but this wonderful woman came up to me at a bookstore in Santa Barbara last week, and she said, we don't know each other. Um, and she said, but I just want to thank you for being brave. And it's clear to me that you've had to be brave every day for a while now.
Mm,
And I said, Heather, to this total stranger, I said, Heather, I'm gonna really try to hold those words. That is really such a beautiful thing to pass to me. Thank you. It really meant a lot. And, I knew people would say, congratulations. Oh, congratulations, you released a book. But when people say thank you, it
mm.
it moves me really deeply. So
But so much meaning when someone says thank you. They've needed it. They've needed, perhaps desperately needed it, as when you're in a point of grief where you started this journey. Well, you brought joy into her life, and that in the book you would describe that, I believe, as micro joy, which I love that micro joy, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your take on that. But I am fascinated by the angles that you found, the angles you looked through the lens to find macro joy. I mean, it sounds so simple, but the way you painted such a beautiful visual with your words of what that looks like. If we could all care enough to celebrate someone else's joy, this world wouldn't be we wouldn't be dealing with so many of the things that we're dealing with. So tell me a little bit about your take on micro joy, and maybe what what about the concerts? I could think of so many instances on your journey when you were experiencing that, but you were always with a friend. So there's a little macro there. And then your thoughts on macro joy.
So I've said to people to preface the experience of reading this book, I said you can kind of choose your own adventure and read it in one of two ways. On the one hand, it's kind of a loose narrative arc of sad girl types good energy in on Spotify. A year later, ends up dancing in the rain with strangers at Wembley as the fireworks are going off at Harry Styles' biggest concert ever, and kind of how I got there and everything in between. But option B, which I think the professor in me thinks is a little more interesting, speaks to this four-part curriculum. And one of my mentors read the book and she said, Essie, you know this book doesn't really have anything to do with Harry Styles, right? And I said, I know, Anne. It's just a motif of sorts, and it's how I began thinking about these questions. But really, a reader can choose to kind of insert whatever their joy source is that, maybe they haven't been taken care of. And but you spoke about the macro joy. And the fourfold framework kind of gets to this question that I was grappling with. So, as I was looking around these concerts, like I mentioned a second ago, thinking about the beauty of communal and collective joy and being in community with one another, I thought to myself, well, what does all of our joy look like outside of the walls of any arena or stadium? Not just your joy, not just my joy, but our joy, collective societal joy. And in the introduction, I introduced this concept called the macro joy, which you can think about as, kind of this joy economy. It's the sum of all of our joy exchanges, our positive additions to it, our negative subtractions. And, you know, for me, my question became, okay, how do we maximize the macro joy? How do we maximize the amount of just joy in the world? And I wrote the framework to answer that question.
Mhm.
And the four parts, it's we maximize the macro joy when we, part one, cultivate joy in our own lives. And part two, adopt others' joy as our own. Part three is all about protecting your joy and other people's joy. And part four is on spreading joy. And I describe the macro joy, if I were to attach a visual, if individual joy is like a balloon, colorful, delicate, easily popped in the wrong hands, something that's worth protecting, then the macro joy would just have to look like an infinite number of balloons. And the question is, how do we inflate more balloons, protect the balloons that are there? And so the fourfold framework endeavors to answer that question.
Can you dive into each piece of that? How about cultivate? Tell us a little bit about what you mean, cultivate.
Absolutely. So cultivating joy, it's all about taking care of your personal joy first. And I became so interested as I was talking to people about joy and talking to these people at the concerts, but also talking to my friends, when I became so deeply interested in this subject. And the fundamental question is, what brings you joy? And Sherri, I'm so surprised the number of people that look at me blankly and say, I really don't know.
Mm.
Or the
Mhm.
number of people that kind of their face falls a little flat and they say, I don't even really know what I love anymore.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing about joy is it shifts and it changes, both in terms of what brings us joy and our understanding of the feeling itself. Sometimes I describe it kind of like this to my students. I'm like, if you've eaten cupcakes all day, all you want is something healthy and a salad. And if you've been eating super healthy all day, maybe you want a little sweet treat. Joy's kind of like that too. If you've had so much peace and quiet and solitude, maybe you're looking to go to a concert or something. But if your life is really crazy and you've got your kids are high energy, maybe joy is like a cup of tea in the morning by yourself.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's not a surefire recipe. And I find that our joy sources shift in the same sense that our understanding of the emotion does. And I think that's exciting. And as I say in the book, if our joy did not shift and change, I would still be obsessed with that Barney the dinosaur t-shirt that I wore when I was 4 years old and loved so much. And that's okay. And I
Yeah.
think we need to be gentle with ourselves on that front. I became deeply interested in this question, and kind of the more I pulled the thread, the more I realized we really need to be engaging with it. It's what brings us joy because it's ultimately such a celebration of who you are as an individual
Mhm.
and what makes you unique. And I find maybe your moral character and your core values define who you are, but your joy profile is what makes you uniquely you.
Mm.
And that's so beautiful. You know, what brings you joy is not what brings me joy necessarily. I'm sure there's overlap, but I lead this exercise in my class at Vanderbilt and I make my students write, maybe it's just a list of 10 things that brings them joy. And I said, and I can guarantee you, no two people in this room have the same list.
Mhm.
And I think that's beautiful and exciting. So, part two on the importance of adopting others' joy as your own. You know, the theme in this section is the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's jealous.
Mhm. That is such to me a unique perspective of viewing that, but it opened my mind, like I said, to looking at things through a different lens, and I love it. So go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So, I think I think this kind of takes two forms in the book. The first form is the equivalent of an intro level class, so to speak. Here's
Mhm.
your easy breezy way to think about adopting others' joy, and that's looking for joy in the excuse me, looking for joy in the wild. So when I was at such a low and I was going to all these concerts and I was looking around at all these people having fun, I realized I was like, I'm their experience is adding to mine. For
Uh-huh.
example, one of my favorite visuals from these concerts, and they were so full of beauty and kindness and all these things. These girls would tie together feather boas to make one long, ginormous feather boa, and they would use it to jump rope with strangers waiting on the concert to start.
Wow.
And I'm just looking and I'm just thinking to myself, there it is, joy in the wild. It has nothing to do with me. I'm rows away, but I'm
Mhm.
getting to experience their joy. And
Yes.
really going to those concerts is what trained my eye to look for it. You know, it's girls braiding each other's hair and it's people offering to take photos for each other. It's these tiny little things. But as I extended outside of the concert setting, I realized that you can go on a joy walk and go look for joy. Maybe it's one of my favorite examples that's in the book. I was writing the book one day at a coffee shop in Nashville, and my peak introvert joy is baseball hat, wearing headphones in the corner, you know, with my journal. And I looked over, and there was a dad and daughter on a Saturday morning coffee date. And she's about 4 years old. This little girl is eating this blueberry muffin like she has just entered another dimension of happiness. Like it's the most delicious blueberry muffin. And both of her arms are like stretched out into the air, and her eyes are closed. And she's just in the moment with this blueberry muffin,
For muffin.
the muffin. And her sweet dad under his baseball hat is just shaking his head and laughing because he's in and I'm thinking to myself, there it is, joy in the wild. And it started as theirs, but now it's mine.
Yes, I love that. I love it. Well, and something that I think is so important here is the kindness element, which the girls with the boas, the
Uh-huh.
daddy taking his precious little daughter to have a blueberry muffin. I mean, it's not big stuff. It's simple kindness that's then it turns into joy, and now you're experiencing the joy from another table or a few rows back. It's
Right.
just it's such a beautiful picture to think about. and such as something that every one of us can access too. So,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
the other day, this isn't in the book, but I'm always looking for joy in the wild because once you've trained your eye, it's such an infectious way to live. I mean, it's like that table of people singing happy birthday so obnoxiously, you know, before I started thinking about this, I'd be like, can they just keep it down? And now I'm like, whose birthday is it? Let's go. This is
Oh,
amazing.
that's a great example. That's such a, do I want to live this way or do I want to live this way? And it really, that's what this is about. It's about choice. It's all about the choices and simple the way we view things and uh, offering joy as an option. What a gift. Okay, so tell us a little bit more.
So then it gets a little more complicated. Perceiving others' joy, who they're strangers, it's someone in a grocery store, coffee shop, whatever it is. I mean, that's relatively easy once you think about it. What's more difficult, I find, is when you're perceiving, or absorbing victories or joy of people who are closer to you in your life. For some reason, that strikes up envy in a
Mm-hmm.
different way.
Mm-hmm.
And, as C.S. Lewis writes, comparison is the thief of joy. And with
Please say
social,
that again. Just say that again. It's so important. Yeah.
yes, as C.S. Lewis writes, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
And social media has made it easier than ever.
Yeah.
And you're comparing maybe your reality to someone else's highlight reel. It's not even an apples to apples comparison. And it's really dangerous. And really, one of my big motivators to write this book is we really need to talk about this more as a society of what this is doing. And I know people are entering the conversation about mental health and social media in terms of how it's affecting teenagers, et cetera. And I think that's really worthwhile and important. But I think it's affecting all of us because, again, it's your reality versus someone's highlight reel.
Yeah.
And it's an even more dangerous comparison. However, one thing that came to mind, and I feel like this is something that you would appreciate this chapter. When I was an art history major at Vanderbilt, I took this very challenging class called Ancient East Asian Gardens and Architecture. And I had to take it to graduate. And it kicked me in the rear. I mean, it was really tough. And one of the concepts that I remember is this Japanese landscape doctrine it's the term is shikai, and that translates to borrowed views. And the concept of shikai is that your neighbor's gardens, the views that you borrow from outside your fence line of your garden, can add to the beauty of your garden. So, for example, if your neighbor has a beautiful yellow ginkgo tree growing on the other side of the fence, you get to borrow the beauty of that tree. You don't want to build anything that would block it because that's just free beauty that you can borrow. And for me, I've never designed a backyard and I don't have a green thumb and I've never had to think about gardening in that literal sense. But that concept came back to me when I was in the thick of grief, the first Christmas following the separation from my ex-husband. And I was living at this temporary place and I didn't want it to be my home. And it was just, I didn't want to nest. I didn't want to make it mine. And because I was only there because of the divorce. And I call it in the book kind of as a joke, the divorce landing pad. So there I was at the divorce landing pad, also known as the DLP for short. And I would walk outside every day and check the mail. And in the past, I had absolutely loved holiday cards and Christmas cards. But that year, looking at them, it was so difficult because I missed being the one to send them. I missed being the one there with my partner sending good holiday wishes. And I missed browsing online for hours to choose one that I would love the most. And that was a wonderful opportunity for envy to creep in and for jealousy to creep in. But as I was looking at these rainbow cards in the divorce landing pad, I thought back to that class at Vanderbilt. And I thought back to this concept of borrowed views. And I had never had to put it in practice in my personal life to the degree that I did that first Christmas season, because I thought to myself, these are just the beautiful, bountiful instances of beauty and goodness that I get to borrow. These are my neighbor's gardens. And it didn't feel like much was growing in my garden at the time. I had unearthed or ripped up the plant bed of my career. I had ripped up, and then there was all this nuclear loss resulting from divorce. And then there was grief of the pandemic. That was a really, there was a lot of fresh dirt. And I didn't know
Mm.
what seeds I wanted to plant next. But what I did have were these dazzling borrowed views. And I thought to myself, I really have beef with whoever said misery loves company. Don't get that. I do not get that. I'm thinking to myself, my boat's taking on a lot of water right now. I need you all to be smooth sailing. I
Mm.
can't I can't bail you out right now. I'm I'm
Yeah.
I'm bailing my own water out of the boat. And I want to emphasize to anyone listening to this is not always easy. And I'm not suggesting that it is. And it's not a surefire recipe, and I wouldn't even say it works all the time. But I can promise that I've never once regretted remembering that this mindset is an option.
I feel like it's reflective also. I mean, you put the you put your friends and your family's cards on the wall, and I'm sure you spoke with them, and you were, you were gaining joy from their joy, but also, I mean, who doesn't love to chat with someone who you just received their Christmas card and, oh, your children are growing, they're precious. Thank you for sharing the beautiful mountain you climbed, that sort of thing. So it goes, it's just unending when we allow ourselves to experience the joy of others. I just that seems so foreign to what is so much is taught these days, and the comparison of social media. But if we can look at social media, even social media, through another lens, don't try to be like everybody else. Just be where we started our conversation, our time together, honest and real and authentic. And what's really fascinating to me that just came to mind, we've talked so little about the Harry Styles concerts, and even though you include that a lot in the book, and I remember talking to you when we first met, thinking, I wonder how 17 Harry Styles concerts could be a book. But it's just a vehicle. It isn't, that's not, I mean, it's a definite piece of it because of the fun and the way that the fangirls. So I wanted to introduce you as a fangirl also, because that fangirl is the one that discovered all of these things. Just, I mean, you have some unbelievable accomplishments in your life, but it was the fangirl that got you. I mean, you were a walker first, and then you became a fangirl, and just the expansive joy, rediscovering joy with a twist. I'm just elated, and I hope that this vision, I hope others can just glimpse your joy through this book. It's just fascinating. I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for the book. So grateful to reconnect with you. Um, is there anything else you want to share about the book that you feel is what you want to be the most impactful, or maybe the most meaningful for you?
I know we have a few minutes left, and so I want to just speak a few sentences about part three and part four.
Okay.
Three
Yeah, please
really
do. Yeah.
does have to do with being the fangirl, because as I was getting so much judgment, as I was going to these shows, it made me really surprised by the amount of hate I was getting, because in my mind, I'm thinking, the opposite of joyful is not joyless, it's judgmental.
Will you explain a little bit about what you mean? I mean, I get it as a girl, as a woman, because we kind of grow up with that as part of our experience. So you were getting judgment for going to Harry Styles concerts.
Absolutely. People were saying, "You used to be a corporate lawyer. Have you lost your mind?" And all these things. And I'm thinking, I've had some really low lows, and I don't feel the need to justify, chasing fun and joy and a high high because there's only one rule in this book. And if something is not harming you or anyone else, we have to protect it because so often joy doesn't show up. So if it does, I think we need to celebrate it and protect it at a minimum. And, I think there is such a stigma around being a fangirl. Oh, you're so hysterical. Oh, you're so, and I'm thinking, you know, grown men punch each other in the face over sports. So I'm not really sure, like, really, we're the emotional ones because we're moved by an art form. Okay. But anyway, I think so often we judge the what without asking about the why.
Oh,
And for me, people were judging the what I was doing and not asking about the why I was doing it. And I could walk anyone through why, but I didn't feel the need to, and it made me question what I had judged in the past. And I think
sure.
not
Yes.
not only do we need to be more gentle with others, we also need to be gentle with ourselves and how joy
Yeah.
shows up in our lives. And like we said at the top of the episode, joy does shift and change, and we need to be ready to embrace those shifts and changes if we want to maximize joy in our lives. And part four is relatively straightforward about the boundless capacity we have to spread joy every day. And I mean boundless. And the dedication page of the book says, for the tiny angels everywhere. And tiny angels is the phrase that I use to celebrate the kindness of strangers who have poured into me over the course of my life. And part four has a chapter called Tiny Angels. And it's just small, one paragraph little anecdotes about how I've been so deeply touched by people's genuine kindness in the past and how I hope to maybe be a little joy bomber myself. So.
I think you're definitely a joy bomber, Essie. I think you're doing it. Oh goodness. Well, um, another piece of this that I really wanted to dive into, the
Mhm.
friends that you, the friends that you had in childhood that helped you through this journey, but also your hairy friends. And,
Mhm.
and I believe you said uh, we're all strangers before we become friends. I mean,
Right.
that one thing, I mean, it's just thinking out of these boxes that we put ourselves in and put other people. So, will you touch on that just a little bit? The friends, how friends impacted this journey, then we'll wind this up.
Absolutely. It is one of my favorite lines in the book is that all friends start as strangers.
Yes.
And it's true. I mean, you and I just walked into our shared accommodations at Bob Goff's retreat, and it was like, "Hi, I'm Hi, I'm Essie," and the rest is history. And for me, going into this environment with that openness and making all these friends at these concerts, you know, I received a lot of judgment for that too. But for me, it reminded me of a playground friendship when you're little. And they say, a little kid might say, "You like the monkey bars? I like the monkey bars." And then you're off to the races. And we forget that it doesn't have to be that complicated. And
Yeah.
and there's a difference between superficial and uncomplicated. These friendships aren't superficial. It's over a shared passion. It's over a love for the same, messages of kindness that are being passed around in this fandom. But they are uncomplicated. And for me, it was so cathartic to not have to be the one going through divorce, to not have to be the one that no longer
Mm.
was practicing law, to not have to be, this person's former neighbor or any kind of context. And it really allowed me to in a season of so much identity stripping, I was no longer a wife, a daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, and all these things. And I was grappling with this question of, okay, who am I if all the on paper, identities and labels have been kind of stripped away? And being anonymous in a crowd was a really powerful
Mm.
and cathartic way to explore this question of who am I in any room I walk into. And I'm so grateful for the friends I met along the way because they were so important in kind of helping me shepherd, and they were not even in the loop that that's what they were helping me do, but
Mm.
there was a lot of really beautiful healing going on. And but again, people were like, what's with the feather boa? Shouldn't you be wearing a blazer at a desk? But
I
I'm
love that. There's so much you're giving so much freedom to so many people by saying that. I mean, those self-imposed ideas that we buy into. You can
right.
have both. You can wear your blazer and your boa, you
That's
know?
100%. And where do we get these narratives that
Yeah.
are just one thing?
Yeah.
I'm let's say I'm a lawyer, period. It's like, okay, well, you're also a painter, a dog mom, a home cook, a party planner, a sister, we all have all these roles and talents and passions and all these
Mhm.
things, but we get so committed to this one silo of I'm this one label. And it's kind of like, well, actually, we all walk a lot of walks. And I think
Yeah.
engaging with the subject of joy helps us realize that.
Do you think that's perhaps why people don't really know? How do they forget because they get so connected with this idea of the persona that they should be. So they lose touch with who they're much more dimensional than that. Um, I mean,
Absolutely.
bringing back the fun, it reminds me of being children again, which is very biblical. Just play, go. Yeah, I love if two kids want to play on the same swing or teeter totter on the playground, then that's reason enough to be friends. And that's so such an example to us as we get stuck in our self-imposed mindsets, I think, or mindsets of others. Sometimes they're pretty imposed on us. So, well, I like to close each episode with your thought of what might seem like a small choice, but that greatly impacts your day to day living and the people around you. So, what would you say? Just a small choice that maybe you make on a regular basis that really impacts your day and also the people that you bump into.
So at Madison Square Garden, I was at a concert this past summer. Excuse me, not a Harry Styles concert, but one of his former bandmates, Niall Horan. And this these cute fans turned around and we were all talking and they said, we made friends through the band. That's how we're best friends and all these great stories. And after we had this wonderful conversation, one of them pulls out a tiny plastic bag of tiny little plastic ducks. And she said, "Hey, you want a duck?" And I was like, "What? I don't understand." And she said, "There's really not much to it. They're just a good vibe." And I thought, 100% I want one of those ducks. Absolutely. And because I'm always looking for fun things to do for my students at Vanderbilt, I looked up on Amazon and confirmed that you can buy 200 tiny ducks for $7. So I thought, I'm definitely going to do that. And I have dubbed them the Good Luck Ducks. I've been handing out these tiny Good Luck Ducks, and I will be at a restaurant, tip and pay, flip over the receipt, place a tiny duck, and say, "This is a good luck duck to bring you good luck on whatever you need it for." And the response, Sherry, is the most fun. And it has brought me so much
Fun.
joy. And I just dare every listener, get a couple tiny
Oh,
ducks, see what happens.
I love it. I love it. I can't thank you enough. I feel so grateful to start the day with you. Thank you. I hope our paths continue to cross,
I
and
will.
I'm
I know it.
so proud of you. Keep up the good work and keep sharing those good luck ducks.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Essie.
Thanks for having me.
Hope to see you soon.
Yes, likewise. Thank you, Sherry.
Bye bye. Next time on Even Just a Little,
by any means was I going to let anybody tell me anything and I didn't fact check it.
Do you think that is a lot of your motivation behind why you do what you do for the kids?
I truly believe it is.
Yeah.
I truly, with all my gut, soul, mind, and body, believe that experience is what I want students to walk away from our program understanding, that you can have your voice. Not that you don't believe what your parents say, but for whatever reason, it wasn't for me to go back and say, you did this. And that's what I also teach children. So parents don't always make the best decisions. Are we going to hold that over their heads for the rest of their lives?
No.
I need to forgive my mother because I would have been angry with her for the rest of my life.
Thanks so much for joining us on Even Just a Little.